Everyone said no woman lasted a week with his sons until the night the billionaire was forced to kneel in his own home. The house had learned to brace itself for chaos, not the loud, childish kind, but the sharp, unpredictable kind that left silence trembling in its wake. Doors slammed without warning, glass shattered for no reason anyone could explain. Alarms screamed at hours meant for sleep. The twins were blamed for all of it. Always the twins. Their presence alone made grown professionals flinch, their footsteps enough to tighten throats in empty hallways. Caregivers didn't quit loudly. They vanished. One left her keys on the counter and never came back. Another packed at midnight and asked security to walk her out. Agencies stopped sending replacements, offering polite excuses and vague delays. Therapists requested hazard clauses. Consultants demanded waivers. Everyone had a reason. No one had a solution. And the man who owned the house? He replaced people the way others replaced batteries. Efficiently, without questions. Failure to him was never complicated. Someone else simply wasn't good enough. His wealth wrapped the estate in silence, not comfort, control, the kind that made staff speak in whispers and avert their eyes, the kind that taught people not to linger, not to ask, not to care too much. His reputation didn't need defending. It arrived before he did. Rooms straightened when he entered. Conversations died. No one ever said no to him. No one ever stayed long enough to try. The twins became a story people told without knowing the truth. Monsters. Broken. Dangerous. Easier to blame children than confront the systems that shaped them. Adults kept their power. The boys carried the shame. Then, against advice and common sense, someone accepted the job. She was warned. Quietly. Urgently. A manager suggested she reconsider. A staff member avoided her eyes. Someone else muttered, "They won't last." She listened without reacting, signed the paperwork without questions, and walked past the whispers as if she'd heard worse before. No one bothered to learn her name. She wasn't hired to raise the twins. She wasn't even hired to stay. She was brought in because everyone expected the same ending. A quick failure, another exit, another excuse to say, "See, we tried." And if this story already makes you uncomfortable, good. It should. Because what happened next didn't expose the children nearly as much as it exposed the adults who were supposed to protect them. Stay with me. Because the moment everyone dismissed is the moment everything began to crack. She wasn't hired to raise the twins. She was hired to fail. She arrived early, before the house fully woke, and that alone set the tone for how invisible she was going to be. Security waved her through without looking twice. A housekeeper handed her a clipboard meant for someone else. Another staff member pointed her toward the supply closet, assuming she was there to mop floors, not manage lives. No one corrected the mistake. No one felt the need to. She moved through the halls quietly, taking in everything without claiming space. The way voices dropped when the twins' names were mentioned. The way certain doors stayed locked longer than necessary. The way adults flinched before children ever raised their voices. She kept her shoulders relaxed, her hands steady, her face neutral. Not fear, not confidence, control. The kind learned when reacting costs you more than silence ever will. There were signs of exhaustion in her posture, the kind that doesn't come from one bad night, but from years of pushing through without permission to stop. A faded scar on her knuckle, shoes worn carefully at the edges. When she paused near a window, her reflection flickered with something heavier than nerves. Loss carried efficiently, grief folded small enough to keep moving. She didn't announce it. She didn't need to. The twins noticed her immediately. They tested her the way children test gravity, by dropping things and watching what breaks. A cup tipped over, a rule forgotten, a sharp lie delivered with practiced innocence. One blamed the other. Then both watched her closely, waiting for the familiar response. Shouting, threats, panic, authority crashing down. It never came. She cleaned the spill without comment, reset the rule without emotion, met their eyes without challenging them. She didn't rush to correct the lie. She didn't lecture. She didn't retreat. She simply stayed, observing patterns instead of reacting to noise, as if she were learning a language everyone else had tried to silence. That unsettled them. By midday, something was broken that no one admitted to touching. A lamp shattered near the stairs. A staff member's voice sharpened. Fingers pointed. One of the twins calmly said her name, said she'd done it, said he saw her. She didn't defend herself. She stood there, hands folded, breathing even, eyes steady, not at the adults, but at the boys. And for the first time since she arrived, they looked unsure. If you've ever been judged before being understood, you already know what this moment costs. Keep watching, because what she refused to do here would change everything. She didn't defend herself, and that confused them. He noticed her the way powerful men notice disruptions, late, and only because she didn't behave the way she was supposed to. Most people shrank when he entered a room. Their bodies adjusted before their minds caught up. Shoulders tightened, voices softened, eyes searched his face for approval or warning. He was used to fear. He expected it. He relied on it. She didn't look up at all. She stood exactly where she was, finishing a task without rushing, without explanation, without apology. No flinch, no attempt to justify herself, no performance of humility, just presence. It irritated him before it intrigued him. When he finally addressed her, his voice was clipped, precise, designed to extract compliance. He waited for excuses, for trembling, for a defensive explanation that would confirm what everyone else already believed. She offered none. Her answers were short, factual, calm. She didn't over-explain or soften her words. She didn't argue. She didn't submit. It felt to him like resistance, but he couldn't point to a single rule she'd broken. That was when the twins escalated, not in private, in front of witnesses. They pushed boundaries with surgical timing, only when adults were watching, only when authority hovered nearby. Voices rose, objects flew, accusations multiplied. The house tightened around them, bracing for impact. Staff responded the way they always had. Louder rules, sharper commands, threats disguised as structure. Every intervention made it worse. Every raised voice fed the spiral. She didn't intervene immediately. She stayed close, spoke low, repeated the same expectations without changing her tone. She didn't corner them, didn't shame them, didn't force eye contact. She acted as if control wasn't something to seize, but something to offer. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the twins settled, not because they were afraid, because nothing was being taken from them. People noticed, and they didn't like it. Schedules were forgotten. Instructions were changed without telling her. Supplies went missing. Someone moved the twins' belongings and blamed her for the confusion. Sabotage dressed up as incompetence. She absorbed it all without complaint, adjusting, recalibrating, refusing to react. The children began to mirror her steadiness. They waited for her cues. They unraveled less when she was near. They watched her when chaos threatened, as if checking whether it was safe to stay whole. That scared the adults more than the destruction ever had. By the end of the week, a senior staff member requested a private meeting. The word used wasn't angry or reckless. It was careful, polite, strategic, dangerous. And that was the moment his attention shifted, away from the twins and fully onto the woman everyone else wanted gone. If you're still here, ask yourself why. Because when power starts watching silence, something is already breaking. Polished concern arrived before open hostility ever did. She swept into the house like she belonged to it. Tailored clothes, measured smile, a voice trained to sound gentle while cutting deep. Her presence shifted the air. Staff straightened. Conversations adjusted themselves around her. She didn't need to raise her voice to command attention. People leaned in willingly. Influence had learned how to disguise itself as care. She spoke about the twins in public spaces, never directly to the woman standing a few steps away. "I worry about consistency," she said once, glancing around the room as if seeking agreement. "Children like this need firm structure." Her eyes flicked briefly toward the woman everyone pretended not to see. "Too much softness can be dangerous." Guests nodded. Someone hummed approval. No one asked the woman what she thought. At dinners and gatherings, people spoke over her shoulder, questioned her decisions without acknowledging her presence, asked who had approved her role as if she weren't standing right there. She answered only when necessary. She refused to perform gratitude. That refusal turned curiosity into resentment. The house grew restless at night. Alarms tripped without warning. A door slammed hard enough to shake the walls. Furniture overturned. Security flooded the halls, radios crackling, flashlights slicing through the dark. The twins' breathing spiraled as commands piled on top of each other. Control tightened. Panic followed. She moved through it calmly, stepping into the chaos without force, without shouting. But the damage was already done. Security blamed her. Someone said she'd lost control of the situation. Someone else suggested she was in over her head. He confronted her afterward. No witnesses, no raised voice. Just cold expectation hanging between them like a verdict waiting to be delivered. She met his gaze without flinching. "Your sons aren't violent," she said quietly. "They're unprotected." The words landed wrong, not defiant, not pleading, observational, as if she were naming a fact no one wanted acknowledged. He didn't respond. Silence stretched, heavy, uncomfortable, the kind that forces people to fill it, or live with what's been said. She didn't add anything, didn't soften it, didn't explain herself into safety. That sentence followed him long after she left the room. It echoed in the spaces he'd avoided, pressed against memories he'd kept buried under efficiency and distance. And if you've ever spoken a truth to someone who wasn't ready to hear it, you know what comes next is never immediate. "Stay with me," because the night hadn't finished exposing what power refused to see. The fundraiser was meant to restore order, to remind everyone watching that the house was still untouchable, that nothing inside those gates could threaten reputation. Valets lined the drive. Cameras hovered where smiles were practiced. Donors arrived dressed in certainty, their laughter echoing too loudly against marble walls. Control was supposed to be the point. The twins felt it immediately. The noise, the eyes, the invisible pressure to behave like symbols instead of children. Adults hovered, correcting before mistakes were made, tightening rules with every glance. One twin's foot bounced uncontrollably. The other mirrored him, breath shallow, eyes darting. No one noticed. Or worse, they noticed and doubled down. A hand clapped sharply. A voice barked an order. Too close, too loud. One twin panicked. The other followed without hesitation. A glass sculpture toppled from its pedestal, shattering across the floor with a sound that cut through conversation like a scream. Guests gasped. Someone shrieked. Phones lifted instinctively. Security surged forward, radios crackling, bodies closing in. The twins froze, cornered, overwhelmed, drowning in authority. She stepped between them and the wall of uniforms. No raised voice, no sudden movement, just her body, placed deliberately in harm's way. One hand extended, not to stop, but to signal pause. Her voice stayed low, steady, almost gentle. She spoke to the boys as if the room didn't exist. They stopped, not slowly, Instantly, the chaos held its breath. Guests stared. Security hesitated, confused by the sudden stillness. The twins' shoulders loosened, their eyes anchoring on her as if she were the only solid thing left in the room. Then the noise rushed back in. Outrage, whispers, judgment. The polished woman moved fast, anger sharpened into righteousness. "She needs to be removed immediately," she said, loud enough to be heard. "This is reckless. This is unacceptable." He didn't argue. Not yet. Later that night, long after the guests were gone and the house had settled into uneasy quiet, he stood alone in the security room. The footage played without sound. Again and again, frame by frame, he saw what no one else had. The moment authority advanced, the boys fractured. The moment she stepped in, without dominance, without threat, they stabilized. Power caused the collapse. Safety stopped it. If this realization is unsettling you, don't turn away, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and neither could he. He watched the footage until the images burned into him. Not once, not twice, dozens of times. He slowed it down, removed emotion, searched for error the way he always did when something failed. But the pattern refused to bend. Every spike in chaos followed the same trigger: commands, confinement, too many adults asserting control at once, authority, stacked like weight on a breaking surface. He pulled the reports next. Thick folders, clinical language, recommendations highlighted and re-highlighted. The words had always given him comfort: structure, solutions, someone else accountable. This time he noticed the gaps: paragraphs smoothed over, observations rewritten to sound decisive instead of uncertain, margins altered, conclusions nudged toward obedience programs and containment, edited. The realization tightened his chest in a way no market crash ever had. The caregivers before her hadn't failed. They'd been overridden, corrected, pressured to enforce methods that looked good on paper and terrible in practice. People had quit not because the children were impossible, but because they were being forced to do harm in the name of discipline. He asked her how she'd known. She didn't mention documents or training. She spoke about timing, body language, what happened just before things fell apart. She described patterns the way someone describes weather, learned by living inside it, not by reading forecasts. She said the boys reacted not to rules, but to the way adults tried to take control of their bodies and choices all at once. Then he confronted the polished woman. She didn't deny any of it. She called it necessary, order, reputation management. She said children like that needed firm hands and stronger systems. That softness created weakness. That control was love, whether it hurt or not. No apology, no hesitation, just certainty. If you're feeling angry right now, sit with it. Because this is the moment many people look away, when harm wears a calm face and calls itself responsibility. He didn't look away, but he didn't act yet either. And that delay, that hesitation to choose what was right over what was safe, it would cost him more than he knew. Stay with me, because when the truth surfaces, the fall always comes next. The truth didn't free him. It cornered him. Once the pattern revealed itself, everything he'd built began to feel unstable. Board members called under the guise of concern. Donors asked careful questions that sounded like support, but smelled like distance. Whispers moved faster than facts, and reputation, his greatest weapon, suddenly felt fragile. The house that once bowed to his authority now waited, watching to see which way he would turn. And for the first time, he understood something devastating. None of this had happened without him. Every system that hurt his sons had been approved in his silence. Every method enforced had worn his signature, even when someone else suggested it. He had delegated fatherhood the way he delegated risk, efficiently, remotely, without ever staying long enough to see the cost. She felt the shift before he said anything. It showed in the way meetings dragged on without decisions, in the way he avoided the rooms where the twins waited for him, in the pauses that stretched just long enough to feel like doubt. She didn't confront him. She didn't demand clarity. She prepared, quietly. She folded clothes with the same care she'd used when she arrived. She placed items back where she'd found them. She left no mess, no accusation, no emotional footprint that could be dismissed as drama. The house barely noticed her packing, but the twins did. They became restless, sharper. One stopped sleeping. The other clung to routines she'd built, unraveling when she wasn't there to anchor them. They didn't ask her to stay. They had learned not to beg adults who might leave anyway. He saw it happening and still hesitated. Power promised protection. Delay promised safety. Choosing her meant confrontation with donors, with allies, with a version of himself that had survived by never choosing discomfort. So he waited, and in that waiting, he chose power first. She didn't announce her departure. She left a note with instructions, practical, detailed, focused entirely on the boys. No emotion, no judgment, just care distilled into ink. By the time anyone realized she was gone, the room she'd occupied was already empty. No goodbye. If this moment feels heavy, it should, because many people don't lose what matters through cruelty, but through delay. If you've ever waited too long to do the right thing, you already know how this ends. Or do you? Stay with me, because the cost of staying silent was about to demand payment. He broke the pattern the way men like him always did, suddenly and without permission. He didn't send an assistant. He didn't schedule a meeting. He showed up himself, standing in the doorway of the small place she'd retreated to, stripped of titles and expectation. For once, there was no board to consult, no reputation buffer to hide behind. Just a man who had waited too long and knew it. He didn't start with money. That was the first shock. He spoke about authority, about decision-making, about removing interference completely. He said the house would change, not her, that she would answer to no one but him when it came to the twins, that the systems that harmed them would be dismantled, even if it made enemies. She listened without interrupting. Then she set boundaries with the same calm precision she'd used since the beginning. No secrecy, no overridden decisions, no treating the boys like liabilities to be managed, and one condition that landed heavier than all the rest. He would stay, not supervise, not delegate. Stay. The twins didn't run to her when she returned. They watched first. Safety to them wasn't affection. It was consistency. It was knowing no one would rush in to overpower them when emotions rose. It was the absence of fear disguised as structure. Slowly, cautiously, they settled back into the routines she rebuilt, testing less, breathing easier, holding themselves together because nothing was being taken. For the first time, he stayed in the room when things got difficult. He didn't speak, didn't command, didn't leave. The power in the house shifted, not disappearing, but reorienting. Control loosened just enough to let something else exist alongside it. Accountability. Not everyone accepted it. A final warning came wrapped in civility and threat, reminding him of favors owed and consequences waiting. A suggestion that this choice would cost him more than it was worth. He listened without responding. Then he made the decision publicly. He chose the twins. If you're still here, ask yourself why this moment matters to you. Because choosing differently doesn't erase the past, it only changes what comes next. And that choice, once made, doesn't end the story. It begins the part that actually counts. Stay with me for what that means. She didn't save the twins. That was the story people wanted. the neat version that made adults feel better about what they'd ignored for so long. But it wasn't true. She stayed. When systems failed them, she stayed. When authority made them unravel, she stayed. When leaving would have been easier, quieter, safer, she stayed without demanding gratitude or recognition. And in doing so, she revealed something deeply uncomfortable. The twins were never the problem. They were mirrors. They reflected every command that crushed them, every adult who chose control over understanding, every system that valued reputation more than regulation of fear. Children don't invent chaos in isolation. They echo what surrounds them. Power, exposed without empathy, had done the damage, and power, once questioned, didn't know how to defend itself. The house changed, but not magically. Some habits lingered, some tensions never fully dissolved. Wealth remained, authority remained. He didn't become gentle overnight, and he didn't deserve applause for correcting what he had allowed. Growth, when it's real, is rarely cinematic. It's awkward, costly, ongoing. He learned to stay in the room when things were uncomfortable, to listen without fixing, to choose presence over performance. Whether he would continue choosing that way, when pressure returned, when consequences piled up, remained an open question. And she? She never claimed victory. She kept doing what she'd always done, protecting dignity, maintaining boundaries, refusing to abandon those who had learned too early that adults disappear. The twins didn't need fixing. They needed someone who wasn't afraid to stay, and that changed everything. But now the question belongs to you. Should dignity matter more than reputation? Would you have stayed or walked away? And after everything you've seen, did he really deserve a second chance? If this story made you uncomfortable, reflective, or quietly angry, don't scroll past it. Stories like this only matter when we talk about them. Share your answer below and stay with this channel because power and pain rarely resolve in one chapter.